today's world, where everyone rushes to speak, react, and retaliate, the one who knows how to stay silent, to pause, and to control themselves has become a rarity. We often get swept up in emotions, driven by others' opinions, and let small daily frustrations disrupt our inner peace. But what would happen if we no longer reacted by instinct? What would happen if we could stand in the middle of the storm and remain calm? That is precisely what Stoicism, through the teachings of Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, and Seneca, guides us to practice daily, not to become emotionless machines, but to become rooted human beings with inner freedom. In today's video, we will explore the most profound and practical principles to help you manage your emotions, master your reactions, and gradually build tranquility, the most valuable asset in a chaotic world. 1. The power of not reacting. There is a very narrow space between being triggered and how we choose to respond. Yet within that small space, sometimes just a few seconds, resides our freedom, our dignity, and our human wisdom. Not reacting immediately is not avoidance or passivity. It is the deliberate act of holding on to self-control. When you choose not to react, you are no longer a shadow of your emotions. You become the master. That restraint doesn't come from weakness, but from a quiet strength within. The strength of refusing to let anyone or anything outside of you control your mind. Reaction is natural, an instinct shaped during our early days of surviving the wild. But in modern life, not every stimulus demands an immediate response. A harsh comment, a sarcastic remark, a disrespectful gesture. None of these can truly hurt you unless you allow them to. As Epictetus once said, no one can offend you without your mental consent. Whether you react or not is the clearest declaration of your inner maturity. The one who does not react does not do so because they feel nothing, but because they have learned to observe emotion instead of being swept away by it. They recognize the rising anger, but they do not become that anger. They feel the hurt, but they do not let that hurt distort how they treat others. They still hear, see, and feel, but they choose to respond rather than react. This distinction is the foundation of a freer, deeper life. Not reacting is also a form of protection. It shields you from the regret of words spoken in anger. It preserves meaningful relationships that could otherwise fracture from one moment of lost control. It conserves mental energy for what truly matters. Every time you stay silent instead of striking back, every time you breathe instead of shouting, you build a layer of armor around your soul. An armor that needs no force, yet holds immense power. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your judgment of it, and you have the power to revoke this at any moment." This is the essence of the power of not reacting. No one forces you to be angry. No one forces you to suffer. You are the one who assigns meaning to what happens, and in that moment, you can choose calm over chaos, dignity over reaction. What matters is not how the world treats you, but how you respond. People may shout, criticize, attack you with words, but if you remain composed, then you are the one who holds true power. Not reacting is how you anchor your inner world. Even when the outside feels like a storm, it is the steadiness of a rock amid crashing waves. Not because it cannot feel, but because it will not be moved. And once you possess that strength, no one can take it from you, unless you hand it over willingly. 2. Recognizing emotion instead of being led by it. Emotion is not the enemy. It is a signal, a natural response of the mind to the world. The problem arises when we cease to observe our emotions and instead become ruled by them. When we fail to recognize what is rising within, it takes the wheel, driving our actions, our words, even the values we hold dear. That's when we say things we shouldn't, do things we regret, and feel remorse once the wave has passed. So the key is not to eliminate emotion, but to name it, so it does not lead us blindly. When you're angry, pause and tell yourself, "This is anger." When you're anxious, admit, "This is anxiety." Simply naming the emotion creates a necessary distance between you and the inner storm. You're no longer the anger, you're the observer of it. Just as seeing a cloud doesn't mean you are the cloud, feeling emotion doesn't mean it defines you. It is a passing part of you, not your entirety. And when you name it, you refuse to let it take the lead. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The color of our thoughts is the color we give them." Emotions can arise at any time, a critique, a cold stare, an unfair situation, but we can choose how to perceive and respond. The first step is always recognition. Observe how your body expresses emotion. Your heartbeat quickens, your throat tightens, your shoulders stiffen. These signals come before thought, warning you that something is stirring. When you notice them, you can pause, breathe deeply, and choose, rather than react on impulse. Recognizing emotion is not just a tool for behavior, it is an act of compassion toward yourself. It allows you to understand, "I'm sad because this touched an old wound," or "I'm angry because I feel disrespected." And when you understand yourself that clearly, you no longer shame yourself for those emotions. You no longer feel weak for feeling hurt or flawed for being human. You simply become a person who observes, understands, and matures. The Stoic does not deny emotion. They simply refuse to let it define how they live. Recognizing emotion is the first step in bringing reason back to the center. Once you do that, you're no longer dragged by fleeting surges. You can act from clarity, from your values, instead of from wounds you haven't yet healed. And when you live like this, every emotion, whether joyful or painful, becomes a teacher, revealing what you still need to learn about yourself. 3. Silence as a noble response. In a world where everyone wants the last word, where people race to justify, explain, prove, or refute, silence becomes rare and a form of remarkable inner strength. Not reacting doesn't mean you feel nothing. Not speakers doesn't mean you're powerless or have no reply. Silence is sometimes the most profound response, not loud, not showy, but full of awareness, dignity, and self-possession that no words could match. Silence is not retreat, but choice. It is how you refuse to engage in meaningless conflict. It is knowing that responding at the wrong moment only pulls you into another's chaos. When someone insults you, provokes you, or baits you, they're inviting you into an emotional terrain they control. And if you engage, they lead the game. But when you remain silent, you cut off the energy that fuels their noise. You leave them to face their own chaos without your participation. Epictetus once said, "It is not the words that offend you, but how you receive them." Silence is the refusal to receive. It is you standing like a wall. Words crash against you but leave no mark. This doesn't come from emotional numbness, but from a deep understanding that you don't have to respond to everything. Silence in that moment is mastery, not defeat. It preserves your clarity, and sometimes gives the other person a chance to meet their own limits. Moreover, silence allows you to listen to yourself. In that pause, you can feel the emotion rising and ask if it truly deserves to erupt, or if it's just your wounded ego speaking. You'll better see what truly matters and what is merely bait. Sometimes, just a few seconds of silence can save you from years of regret. Silence is also compassion. Sometimes, what another person needs is not a rebuttal, but space to hear their own voice. A comeback may feed your pride, but timely silence may preserve a relationship, mutual respect, or simply your peace. When you stop trying to win with words, you protect something more valuable, your inner steadiness. The Stoic does not stay silent because they lack words. They stay silent because they know when to speak and when not to. They understand that not all valuable responses need language. Sometimes a calm gaze, a slow nod, or simply walking away. These are the clearest and strongest messages. 4. Mastering your emotional temperature. Emotions are like an internal thermometer, constantly shifting with external stimuli. But the Stoic does not live like a thermometer, always rising and falling with the environment. They live like a thermostat, a conscious regulator, setting the internal climate regardless of what happens outside. Mastering your emotional temperature means not letting your mood swing with someone else's words, actions, or behavior. You do not hand over the controls of your emotions to anyone but yourself. Too often, we let our moods be altered too easily. A cold glance sparks overthinking. A careless remark ignites anger. A negative comment ruins an entire day. Yet every time you react like that, you're giving someone else a remote control to adjust your mind. And the more people possess that control, the more you become subject to external chaos, unbalanced and pulled by the world around you. The Stoic knows no one can make you feel anything unless you allow it. The power of control always remains with you, not because you're numb, but because you're awake. Mastering emotion doesn't mean denying or suppressing it. On the contrary, it is the practice of observing, recognizing, then choosing a measured response. When you feel yourself heating up, pause and ask, where is this feeling coming from? Is this truly important? Am I reacting from an old wound? These questions help cool you down, not by forcing silence, but by understanding what's unfolding inside. And once you understand, you'll realize there's no need to explode. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "If you're quick to anger, know that you have handed your software over to someone else." Every time you're upset by someone, enraged by a situation, panicked by the unexpected, you've allowed the outer world to rule your inner life. The Stoic trains daily to keep their emotional temperature steady. Not so cold they lose compassion, not so hot they lose clarity. They learn to breathe slower, speak less, and observe more. From that steadiness, they act, not react. Emotional mastery is a skill, not an inherited trait. Like physical training, it requires consistent practice, day by day, situation by situation. Don't wait for chaos to learn composure. Begin with the small moments, an irritating email, someone cutting in traffic, a thoughtless comment from someone close. Treat them as opportunities to control your temperature, to prove that peace doesn't come from a calm world, but from an inner thermostat. 5. Stepping back to protect your energy. In many situations, the wisest thing you can do is not to argue, explain, or clarify. It is to withdraw. Not in defeat, but in awareness. It is when you realize not every battle deserves your energy. Not every word demands a reply. Not every misunderstanding must be cleared up immediately. And sometimes, holding back isn't weakness. It's the height of wisdom and self-command. We grow up believing that stepping back means losing, being lesser. But the Stoic knows this. If you must sacrifice your inner peace just to win a point, the cost is too high. Emotional energy is not infinite. Every time you get angry, sad, or caught in conflict, you drain a part of your mental resources that could be used to create, learn, heal, or love. Stepping back at the right moment is not escape. It is the act of one who values clarity and knows where they do not need to be. Some people create conflict by nature, and some situations exist solely to test you. They want you to react, to pull you into the chaos they inhabit. But when you choose to leave that game, you not only keep your balance, you control the field. A calm person dragged into anger becomes weak. But one who stays out, who chooses silence and departure when needed, holds the true power, power from within, not from outward assertion. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Don't waste time arguing with those who don't seek to understand." Some conversations are not about understanding, but about winning. Some relationships deplete the more you invest, and sometimes the only thing left to do is let go, not from hatred, but because it's time to protect yourself. Withdrawal doesn't mean giving up entirely. It's the act of setting a boundary so you can return to nourish your spirit, restore your energy, and live aligned with your values. The Stoic does not see quick reactions as strength. They know that a mind hypersensitive to outside triggers will never find rest. That's why they retreat quietly. No need to explain, prove, or win. They take one step back to see more clearly. They release a word to preserve peace. And they understand nothing is more precious than preserved inner energy. In a noisy and restless world, this is the most courageous and lucid choice you can make. 6. Observing emotion as an outsider. One of the most valuable human abilities is learning to observe your own emotions as if they were happening to someone else. This is not apathy. It is a higher form of awareness. It is the capacity to stand apart from the internal storm, to feel it fully without being carried away. The Stoic does not deny emotion, but refuses to let it govern action. And that begins with observing, not embodying. When you observe your emotions like an outsider, you are no longer the anger. You are seeing the anger. You are no longer the anxiety. You are witnessing the anxiety. Emotions, like clouds drifting through the sky of the mind, no longer cling to you. They simply pass. That small distance between the one who feels and the one who watches is where freedom is born, where mastery begins, where you no longer act on impulse but from clarity. To do this, you must practice slowing down. When strong emotions rise, ask, what is happening within me right now? Where did this feeling begin? Is it familiar? Does it echo an old wound? These questions aren't for overthinking, but for stepping out of the current and viewing it from another angle. Like watching a movie, you feel with the character, but you aren't consumed by their plot. You remain grounded, even as your heart stirs. Emotions are the same. You can touch them, but not be swept away. Epictetus taught you cannot control what happens, but you can control how you perceive it. Perception here is not just thought, but a stance of observation, where you don't immediately react, but step back to see how the mind is reacting. Once you see this clearly, old patterns emerge. Maybe you always rage when ignored or spiral into worry when uncertainty appears. And once you see them, you are no longer trapped by them. You are learning to unhook yourself from the invisible chains that have bound your mind for years. Observing emotion opens the door to compassion, not only for others, but for yourself. You stop blaming yourself for being angry or sad. You simply witness it as part of the human experience. Nothing more, nothing less. By standing outside it, you begin to understand. Emotions are not enemies. They are signals. And you don't need to fight a signal. You need to understand it, then choose your next move wisely. This practice takes time and patience. But each time you pause to observe instead of react, you lay another brick in the foundation of a steady mind. You are cultivating emotional wisdom, not loud, not dramatic, but quiet and unwavering. Others may not see it, but inside, you've just weathered a storm with stillness and awareness. And that is a true victory. 7. Transforming negative energy into self-development. Each time you feel angry, offended, hurt, envious, or anxious, you stand at a crossroads. Either let the emotion drag you down or use it as fuel to rise. The Stoic does not aim to eliminate negative emotions, for they understand these are unavoidable parts of human life. But they also know that beneath every intense emotion lies a powerful stream of energy, and if directed wisely, that energy becomes a force for personal growth. Imagine anger as a flame. Left unchecked, it burns through everything around it. Relationships, reputation, inner peace. But when redirected, that same energy can warm your willpower, light up your purpose, and melt away outdated limits within you. Instead of yelling, you can run to release it. Instead of retaliating, you can write to examine your thoughts. Instead of being ruled by the emotion, you can use it as a mirror to reflect what inside you still needs healing. The Stoic believes that what wounds you most also has the greatest potential to teach you, if you're willing to listen. An insult becomes a chance to learn detachment from external validation. A rejection becomes an exercise in resilience and inner will. An injustice awakens a deeper desire to live with value and respond with greater kindness. Every negative emotion, when seen with clarity, contains a message of growth. However, this transformation is not instant. It's a long journey of observing, understanding, and choosing your response deliberately. When you find yourself angry, don't rush to suppress or act. Pause and ask, why does this trigger me so deeply? What am I afraid of? What can I learn from this emotion? These questions shift you from impulsive reaction to intentional maturity, where you begin to command your emotions rather than be commanded by them. Marcus Aurelius once reminded himself, the obstacle is the way. What causes suffering, if met with reason and patience, becomes a noble teacher. The Stoic doesn't avoid pain, but neither do they let themselves be trapped in it. They use the pain to build inner strength, turning hardship into opportunity, every wound into a step toward becoming more. And that is why they are not undefeated, but they are unbreakable. 8. Ask yourself, will this still matter in 5 years? In those moments when emotions surge after an insult, a failed plan, a misunderstanding, or being ignored, everything within you may rise in protest. The mind narrows to one thought: I must act now, I must respond. But this is the trap of emotion. It shrinks your vision, makes you forget the wider picture of life. And in that very moment, a question that seems simple can pierce the darkness like a beam of light. Will this still matter in 5 years? The Stoic never makes major decisions when their mind is small. They train for long-term thinking, pulling themselves out of short-term impulses with the right questions. And this is one of the most effective. It lifts you from emotional immediacy into the clarity of the future. It forces an honest answer. Does what you're so caught up in truly deserve a place in your memory? Or is it just a passing ripple you've mistaken for a storm? Many things that upset or pain us today become meaningless in a matter of days. A rude comment on social media, a colleague's careless remark, a moment of not being heard. These things might cost you a night of sleep or an afternoon of frustration. But if you ask yourself, will I even remember this in 5 years? You'll often see it's not worth your peace or energy. And when that becomes clear, you no longer need to force forgiveness, because there's nothing left to forgive. Marcus Aurelius once advised himself, frequently view all things as though from a great distance. Thinking far, seeing from above, is one of the fastest ways to cool emotion. The question, what about 5 years from now, doesn't just slow your reaction. It reminds you life is too short to cling to the trivial. It teaches you to discern what truly matters, what deserves emotional investment, and what can be released without regret. This practice doesn't mean becoming indifferent to the present. It means living with intention. You refuse to be led by minor collisions. You reserve your mind for lasting values, for real relationships, for what you'll still care about long after time has passed. And with every time you ask that question, you're not just stepping out of a negative feeling. You're building an inner life that is visionary, restrained, and deeply compassionate. Virtues the Stoics always cherished. 9. Write it down instead of speaking it in emotion. When emotions surge, instinct pushes us to speak, quickly, forcefully, bluntly, for release. But words spoken while the mind is still entangled in feeling rarely lead to anything good. They reflect hurt more than truth, reaction more than reason, and once spoken, they cannot be taken back. The Stoic knows this well. So they choose another path. Write it down before speaking it aloud. Writing slows the current of emotion, turning reaction into reflection. When you write, you're forced to pause. The hand cannot move as fast as the mind, and that slowness is a gift. It lets you hear your own heart more clearly, see your thoughts more plainly, and understand what's truly going on inside. A simple line like, "I am angry because," opens a door to deeper emotional layers. Anger at being dismissed, at feeling helpless, at old wounds being reopened. And from there, you begin to see. The pain often isn't about them. It's about what remains unhealed within you. Writing also preserves the dignity of the relationship. Instead of arguing or saying something harsh, you choose silence. Not out of suppression, but because you are first processing the wave in private. You let the emotion pass through paper before it becomes a weapon. And often, once the writing is done, you realize you no longer need to speak. The storm has settled inside you. No one was hurt. No one regrets anything. Marcus Aurelius, a ruler, a soldier, and a Stoic philosopher, left behind hundreds of journal entries never meant for the public, only for self-understanding. He wrote to train his character, to dialogue with his emotions, to hold on to reason in a world that demanded quick, forceful responses. Journaling wasn't a luxury. It was a vital tool for a deeper life. In each line, he spoke honestly to himself, with no performance, no defense. More than that, writing is a form of healing. As you write, you transform emotion from chaos into clarity. You give sadness a shape, anger a shelter, and yourself a safe space to breathe. You are no longer driven by emotion. You are speaking with it, like a friend who needs to be heard. And that becomes the ground for emotional maturity. Not through suppression, but through understanding and gentle release. 10. Letting go of the need to prove yourself. One of the most powerful hidden forces that drive human behavior is the desire for recognition. We try to do better, speak better, appear more capable, not because those things matter in themselves, but because we want others to see, know, and validate our worth. But the Stoic understands that if you live to prove yourself to others, you've handed the keys of your life to unstable opinions and ever-shifting standards. And sooner or later, you'll feel exhausted, confused, or even lost when the approval no longer arrives. Letting go of the need to prove yourself doesn't mean rejecting growth or abandoning ambition. On the contrary, it means continuing to train, continuing to progress, but no longer depending on others' attention. You live by principles, not applause. You act from values, not expectation. You don't need others' agreement to know your path is right. And you don't need to win an argument to feel worthy. Because true worth doesn't come from winning. It comes from inner steadiness, from knowing who you are and why you live the way you do. We often feel hurt when misjudged, misunderstood, or unrecognized for our efforts. But the Stoic poses a piercing question. Does that change who you truly are? If someone fails to see your inner qualities, their denial doesn't erase those qualities. And if you feel the need to prove, explain, or impress, then you're building a false version of yourself. And that can never last. Marcus Aurelius once reminded himself, "Don't worry about what others think. Worry about how you live." The Stoic does not value reputation more than substance. They do not define worth by image. They choose to fulfill their roles: citizen, friend, parent, spouse, leader, with integrity, even if no one notices or applauds. And from this freedom from needing to prove, they become truly free. Free from the exhaustion of comparison. Free from the pressure to surpass others. Free from the noise of opinion, to return to the voice of conscience. Letting go of the need to prove yourself is a timely pause. It doesn't make you fall behind. It simply saves you from chasing a race with no finish line. It reminds you that the only one you need to prove yourself to is the person you were yesterday, and no one else. And if today you've lived more wisely than yesterday, then you've already won. In the quiet, steadfast, and dignified way a Stoic quietly upholds. 11. Practicing compassion toward others and toward yourself. In a world filled with conflict and misunderstanding, compassion is not softness, but the quiet strength of one who understands themselves and therefore understands others. The Stoic doesn't live to please, but neither do they live with coldness or cruelty. On the contrary, they keep a clear heart, able to see others' actions without judgment, to forgive without weakness, to empathize without absorbing negative emotion. Compassion for others begins with a simple truth. Everyone is struggling with something you cannot see. A rude person may be carrying unseen burdens. A critic may be battling their own insecurity. When someone hurts you with their words or actions, your first impulse is often to resist or retreat. But the Stoic asks a different question. If I were them, living their life, carrying their memories and fears, would I have acted any differently? This isn't to excuse wrongdoing, but to unlock understanding. So you don't carry anger with you all day. Practicing compassion is also a way to protect your energy. When you don't let others control your emotions, you are free. When you respond with empathy instead of anger, you preserve clarity and dignity. Forgiveness is not because they deserve it. It's because you deserve peace. And that peace can only come from a heart unburdened by resentment, from the awareness that human beings are more than their worst behavior. But compassion isn't only for others. It must begin with yourself. In life, you will stumble, react poorly, say things you shouldn't. The Stoic doesn't deny these missteps nor run from them. They face them, extract the lesson, and then forgive. They understand that no one matures by demanding perfection from themselves. Forgiving yourself doesn't mean repeating the mistake. It means accepting you are still in progress, with patience, honesty, and enduring resolve. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "When someone wrongs you, consider that they acted from ignorance of a better way. Then ask, have I always known the better way myself?" That question opens a wide door to compassion, both outward and inward. Living with that awareness, you no longer argue over every disagreement. You no longer carry wounds to bed. You release, not from weakness, but from the strength of not needing to hold on. 12. Cultivating a growth mindset and embracing imperfection. One of the most damaging beliefs we hold is that we are only worthy if we never fail, never falter, never fall. That mindset not only makes you afraid of being seen with flaws, it also makes you prone to giving up when life doesn't meet expectations. The Stoic, by contrast, approaches life with a different mindset, a growth mindset. It is the belief that you can always learn, train, and improve. Not to become perfect, but to live honestly with your own journey, mastering one small step at a time. A growth mindset is not blind optimism. It doesn't deny that you will trip, struggle, respond poorly, or fall short of your ideals. But instead of letting failure define them, the Stoic sees it as material for discipline. Every mistake is a lesson. Every moment of lost composure is a signpost for inner work. Every outburst is a reminder that the path of self-mastery is still underway. And that doesn't make you weak. It makes you honest and real. Marcus Aurelius, respected by an empire, admitted in his journals that he too felt anger, fatigue, and failure. But he never stayed in regret. He faced his limitations to improve them, not to be ruled by them. Stoic thinking doesn't demand you reach some exalted state. It simply asks that you stay awake, keep adjusting, keep learning, and take each day one step closer to the person you are meant to become. At the same time, growth must be accompanied by acceptance. Acceptance that you are human, living in the real world, where flaws exist, where pain happens, and where not everything is ready to change. This acceptance doesn't mean surrender. It is the foundation that frees you from the guilt of not having it all figured out. It lets you hold compassion for yourself, not to indulge, but to keep your heart open when you fail. Growth mindset also teaches you to see others with more grace. When you understand that every kind of maturity takes time, you stop expecting perfection in how others treat you. A wrong word doesn't always mean bad intent. It may simply be a lack of practice. And that doesn't make you weak or naive. It makes you stronger in protecting both your boundaries and your peace. The Stoic lives with the belief that everything can be refined. The mind, habits, responses, perception, emotional depth. But they don't obsess over some perfect destination. They lay small bricks of character each day, choosing awareness over autopilot, reason over reactivity, progress over shame. And in that journey, imperfection is no longer something to hide. It becomes living proof of patience and the will to grow. I used to be someone who reacted quickly. Even a cold glance could irritate me, and a poorly worded comment was enough to make me speak up. But the more I reacted, the more I felt I was losing control, losing energy, and sometimes even losing relationships that mattered. It wasn't until I encountered Stoic philosophy that I understood true strength isn't found in winning arguments, but in staying clear-minded amidst what you cannot control. I began to pause, to breathe before speaking, to write down my emotions instead of letting them become words that might hurt someone. Every time I chose not to react, I felt myself grow a little more, understand myself a little better, and most importantly, feel more at peace. I no longer feel the need to prove anything. I only need to live rightly, day by day, with a clear mind and a heart gentle enough to forgive both others and myself. And I believe it's something anyone can practice if they begin with the small moments of daily life. If you found this content helpful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you won't miss future reflections. Thank you for taking the time to listen, reflect, and walk this path together. May you always remain calm and steadfast, not because the world is gentle with you, but because you are deep enough not to be shaken by it. See you in the next video.